This phone could be the beginning of a new era, and I don't say that lightly. This is the first ever China phone that could very strongly appeal to a Western audience, so let's unbox it and then see what they've done. But very quickly before we get into that, I'm actually giving away 2 of these smartphones as well as another surprise on top of that, over on the Mr. Who's the Boss Instagram page. It's completely free, completely international, so feel free to check out the link in the description below. So if you've been paying a very close eye to the packaging, you'll probably realize we've got the top spec model over here, with 6GB of RAM and 128GB of storage. Off to a very good start, but there's more here. The box has got a weighty, compact feeling to it, and I quite like the splashes of red you see across it. They add a unique flair. It's got some engraved text, and the smartphone is pretty much the first thing you'll see. Let's put that to the side for a second and take off the tray, under which we find 2 main compartments. Within the first one we have a charging brick capable of Qualcomm's Quick Charge 3, as well as a USB Type-C cable, and regrettably a USB Type-C to headphone jack adapter. You can probably tell from the symbols on the front of the second box what that's got inside, but it starts with a very standard silicone case, instruction manual, and a plastic screen protector. Okay, this phone has an unprecedented feeling in the hands, very reminiscent of Samsung's Galaxy S8. It's got curved front, curved back, and when you take that wrapping off you realise a dazzling rear finish. Now, the price of the Elephone U Pro starts at $389, which might be more than you were expecting, but you'll quickly realise this is pitched straight at the flagship phones, the Galaxy S8 and even the Galaxy S9. Every aspect of the phone indicates that the company is finally starting to take things more seriously, and that they are keen to produce a winner. Their recent Elephone S8 smartphone was definitely a step in the right direction, but in some senses this phone over here feels like a leap. And the first thing that's probably going to spring out to you is the display. This is the first ever so-called budget China phone with a curved display. It's a 6-inch AMOLED panel, and many have tried to mimic this technology by instead curving the glass, but the curved display underneath actually adds a somewhat Galaxy S8 aesthetic to it that is yet to be matched by a phone of this price. And much to my surprise, the curve is near identical to the one found on the actual S8, as are the near invisible side bezels. The resolution is only Full HD+, but this does have a modern 18:9 aspect ratio, and to the untrained eye, it is not easy to tell. The U Pro screen is fantastic, and some might actually prefer its cooler tones compared to the Galaxy S8's slight redness, but its maximum brightness is lower. What you will notice with the U Pro though is that whilst colours are really well represented and white's super accurate when you're looking head on, as soon as you look from a steep angle, the phone has a very noticeable yellow aesthetic. Whilst the Galaxy S8 on the left looks almost identical from any viewing angle, that is not the case with the Elephone. Alright, but that is only the start of the cool stuff with the Elephone U Pro. It's got face scanning, which admittedly only uses the front camera, but the company claims 0.08 seconds to unlock. Unfortunately, this didn't quite end up being true. It ended up being more like 0.2 to 0.5 seconds, which by the way is still pretty fast, but I feel like that exaggeration was unnecessary. Most of the time for me, I found the fingerprint scanner both easier and faster. And speaking of this, the placement is great. It is just below the dual camera, which means your finger is almost always naturally resting on top of it. Unfortunately, this one also suffers a very similar fate to the one seen on Samsung's S8, because it's just not very differentiated from the camera module, so your finger oftentimes actually ends up just covering the second camera. Near stock Android 8.0 out of the box is a real surprise. This is close to being first for a China phone. The UI looks, on one hand, like it has been designed from scratch, but at the same time, like it's the love child of many different user interfaces all in one. There are elements of iPhone X in there, Galaxy S8, even Xiaomi, and the end result looks a little bit confused. It's not bad, but it does lack refinement, which is quite understandable given the rush to get this thing to market. And I've got to say, whilst initially I wasn't that impressed, you can really grow to like it. You've got full control over your navigation keys and the way they look, which I think more manufacturers should definitely look into. And whilst the front end is heavily skinned, you quite quickly realise the back end is very much left untouched from stock Android, so you'll feel very much at home coming from a phone like the Pixel 2. Alright, so one of the biggest signs of the company's change of mindset here is the switch from a MediaTek chip like the Helio X20 or the X25 to the Snapdragon train. This guy rocks a Snapdragon 660, 6GB of RAM and 128GB of storage. It's fast, but somewhat let down by the skin placed on top of it. It's not the most responsive phone I've used with this chipset. But nonetheless, as you can probably imagine, things move along at a pretty rapid pace here. Nothing takes too long. Highly intense graphics move along at a steady pace, and due to the copious amount of RAM, multitasking is a breeze too. But it's easy to forget that this souped-up smartphone from Elephone is not really in budget territory anymore. At $389 for the base model, going up to $425 for the top-tier model, it's actually verging in on the price of a smartphone like the OnePlus 5T, one that is significantly more powerful with its Snapdragon 835. What I was really impressed by was if we combine the 3550 mAh battery with Qualcomm Quick Charge 3 with wireless charging, you've got a pretty good battery setup too. You're looking at a comfortable day of use with about 10 to 20% spare. Not bad at all. The Elephone U Pro has a legitimate dual camera, which is a sigh of relief after a lot of these fake dual cameras we've been seeing around, and it uses its 13 megapixel resolution well. Photos come out detailed and colourful. But unfortunately, this camera almost requires good lighting, without which its dual camera features completely stop working, and it can't even differentiate an object that is 20 centimeters away from one that is 5 meters away. Portraits fare a little bit better, but faced with any tough situation like hair and edge detection completely loses it. The fact that the phone records 4K video is good, but the fact that it can't do so whilst maintaining a consistent frame rate is poor, and grain creeps in quite quickly in lower light. So whilst on one hand this camera is a sigh of relief, on the other hand, considering the phone is nearly $400, it is way too inconsistent to say it's a good one. The U Pro is finished off with Gorilla Glass 5, which in my opinion is a pretty good choice of materials here. It adds a little bit of weight and a little bit of thickness, but only to the point that it makes it feel premium, nothing more. It's been built using a number of different layers that reflect lights in different ways, so you shine any bright light onto the back of this phone and you've got a light show going on. It is very susceptible to fingerprints and attracts scratches too, a little bit easier than I was expecting, but at the same time overall I'd say a positive impression. One other thing worth bearing in mind is that whilst they've definitely tried to mimic the pebble-esque aesthetic of the Galaxy S8, they've not done so perfectly. Around the edges of this phone, it is just a little bit sharper and a little bit less seamless than that seen on the S8. Close, but noticeably not there. The buttons too have a slight extra click here, which makes them feel cheaper than the softer buttons of more expensive phones. The Elephone U Pro is a very accomplished smartphone. It has a legitimate dual camera, curved display, face scanning, Android 8.0 and the latest Snapdragon chip, which all show a company that have their heads in the right place. It feels very much like a premium phone you might find in Western markets, and it ticks nearly every box. But the problem is, it's nearly priced like one too. With not quite enough power to be classed as a top-tier flagship, and a camera that isn't quite there either, the Elephone U Pro is less of a flagship killer and more of a very strong mid-range phone, with some high-end features like that great curved display. Thanks a lot for watching guys, I really hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button down below, and check out the giveaway over on Instagram. My name is Aaron, this is Mr. Who's the Boss, and I'm signing out.